Wildflowers of the Farm, Chapter 3, Flowers on the Walls, by Arthur Owens Cooke. Recorded for LibriVox Coffee Break Collection, Volume 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording by Amy Benton. Wildflowers of the Farm, Chapter 3, Flowers on the Walls, by Arthur Owens Cooke. Behind the narrow strip of ground, with flowers and shrubs on the other side of the drive, there was a low stone wall. A piece of the lawn on which the mulberry tree stands has been cut away, and a flight of steps leads down to a little gate into the fold-yard. This wall between the garden and the fold-yard is very old and rough, not like the smooth brick walls you see in towns. The stones are of different shapes and sizes. The mortar has fallen out of it in many places, and here and there are holes and crevices. Yet it is a very beautiful old wall, for many things grow on it. Mosses and grasses, and other flowers too are there. On this May morning we will not only see but also smell one of the flowers which grow upon the wall. It is the beautiful, sweet-scented wallflower. It grows here and there along the top of the wall, and a few plants of it are even springing from the sides. Some of the plants are quite large, and their stems are tough. These have grown here for a long time. The wallflower is a perennial plant. Unless it is killed or torn up by the roots, it will live and grow for many years. Others are quite young and only a few inches high. These have grown from seeds dropped last autumn by the older plants. You very likely wonder how the wallflower or any other plant can grow upon the wall, for there's no earth to be seen, nothing but stones and crumbling mortar. But if we pull up one of the smaller plants, we shall find earth clinging to its roots. Dry, dusty earth has been blown upon the wall by wind, and has lodged in chinks and holes. Dust and soil, too, were mixed with the mortar when the wall was built, and dead leaves falling upon it and decaying have produced a little more, for decayed leaves make earth or soil. Wallflowers and other plants which grow on walls and rocks find very little soil sufficient for their needs. Most of the blossoms of the wallflowers upon this wall are of a dark golden yellow color, and are very sweet. Some of the blossoms are, however, a darker yellow than others, and here and there are petals which are quite brown. If we look at the garden behind us, we shall see that Mrs. Hammond has several beds of wallflower this year. It is a flower of which she is very fond. There are wallflowers of two different colors in her beds. One kind has a bright golden blossom, rather deeper in color than any of those upon the wall. The other has flowers that are rich dark brown. These plants are sturdier and more bushy than those upon the wall, and there are more flowers on each plant. The flowers are finer, too, and have a stronger scent. If Mrs. Hammond had wished, she could have sown seed to produce many different shades of brown and yellow wallflowers. She might also have had a purple wallflower, or even a wallflower of so pale a yellow as to be almost white. If you and I were clever gardeners, and had plenty of time and patience, we could get purple or nearly white wallflowers from these yellow-flowered plants upon the wall. It would take us many years, but we should succeed at last, and this is how we should set about it. Suppose that we wish to have a wallflower nearly white. We should look carefully along the wall in spring when the blossoms are out, until we find the very palest yellow blossom we could see. We should mark that plant, and when the flower was over and the seed was ripe, we should collect the seed. Among the plants grown from this seed, we should choose again the plant that has the palest flowers, and should save the seed from that. We might have to go on doing this for 20 years or more, but in time we should have a wallflower so pale as to be almost white. Quite white we should never get our wallflower, for no pure white flower can be obtained from a yellow one. However pale our wallflower might be, there would still always be just a tinge of yellow or cream color in it. If, on the other hand, we wanted a purple or very dark brown wallflower, we should save seed from those blossoms which were nearest to the color we wanted, dark brown, or with a tinge of purple in them. We should sow seed from the darkest blossoms again and again, and at last we should get what we wished to have. Besides choosing seed from the lightest or darkest blossoms, we should tend our plants very carefully and well, giving them plenty of good rich soil. This would make them grow bushy and with many flowers, as we see them in Mrs. Hammond's garden beds. Many of our garden flowers have been produced in this way, by selecting and improving wild flowers. Of course all flowers grow wild somewhere, some in England, but many more in foreign countries, where the air is warmer and the soil richer and better. The pansy is a little English wildflower with yellow, blue, and red petals. From this little flower gardeners have produced large and beautiful pansies of many different colors and shades of colors, white, yellow, blue, and brown. This has been done by careful selection, just as we spoke of doing with the wallflowers. But if the large, single-colored pansies, of which I have told you, or Mrs. Hammond's dark brown wallflowers were allowed to seed themselves, that is, were allowed to drop and sow their own seed year after year, do you know what would happen? They would gradually revert or turn back to their original form and color. The flowers would become mixed in color and less fine in size. At last they would be simple wildflowers again. Now it is June, and the blossoms of the wallflower have faded and fallen. The old wall is, however, growing gay with another plant, the red valerian. We must be careful to remember that it is the red valerian, for there are other valerians. There is the great valerian, which does not grow on walls or rocks, but in damp and shady places. Its flowers are pale pink. The blossoms of the red valerian on the wall are bright crimson, and they grow in rows on small stems which spring from a stout stalk, a foot or two in height. Each blossom of 5 petals forms a little tube or corolla. The base or foot of each little tube appears as a point on the under side of the flower stem. The red valerian, like the violet, is a spurred flower. The leaves are long and pointed. They grow in pairs on opposite sides of the stalk. Sometimes the edges of the leaves are quite smooth, and sometimes they are serrated or toothed, like the edge of a saw. If we pulled a plant of red valerian from the wall, we should find the roots very long and branching. They need to be so, for the plant often grows on rocks and other places where it is exposed to wind. If the roots had not a firm hold, the tall stems, laden with blossoms, might be blown down. The red valerian flowers all through the summer. Its clusters of crimson flowers are as great an ornament to the old wall as were the wallflowers in May. Now let us go down the steps into the fold-yard. There's a wall on either side of us as we descend. The wall which faces the north is nearly always in shadow, and there are ferns growing out of it between the stones. One of these is a beautiful hart's-tongue fern, with large and shining leaves. We said just now, however, that ferns have no flowers, so we will turn to something that grows on the wall opposite. This is the ivy-leaved toadflax. It grows on walls and rocks as the red valerian does, but it is a very different plant in appearance. The stems of the red valerian are tall and upright. Those of the toadflax are slender and drooping, and there is a large mass of it on the side of the wall. And we find that the root is at the highest point of the whole mass. The stems of the flowers and leaves hang down below the root. It is a trailing plant. There are, however, other roots clinging to the wall, here and there below the main root. The plant, like several others, is able to throw out fresh roots from the joints of its stems, and these give it a firmer hold. The flowers are small, and their color is a pale lilac blue, with a bright yellow spot in the center. These flowers, too, are spurred. The leaves are smooth and thick, what is called fleshy. If they are divided into 5 lobes or divisions, they are not unlike an ivy leaf in shape. When we turn a leaf or two over, we see the underside of some is dark purple. This little plant is usually said to prefer a damp situation, and to blossom from May until October. This wall beside the steps is certainly rather damp, for the moisture from the garden above soaks down to it. In my own garden, however, the ivy-leaved toadflax grows on some very old dry walls, and I have found it in flower in the middle of December. Neither the toadflax nor the red valerian are really natives of England. They were brought to our country many hundreds of years ago. They have spread so much that they have now become wildflowers. In the same way, many others of our wildflowers were once unknown to England. Now that we have come down the steps into the fold-yard, we see that it lies a good deal below the house and garden. Built round the fold-yard are the stables for the cart-horses, the cow-houses, and the great barn. Behind the stables is the rick-yard. That, like the garden, is above the fold-yard. From it there are only 2 or 3 steps to the door of the loft, or tallet, above the stables. It is there we will go now. The wall of the tallet is of stone, and is very old. The roof is tiled. There is a little hole cut at the bottom of the door, and you will see one like it at the door of the granary. It is made so that old Tib and all the other cats can go in and catch mice. Growing between the stones of the wall, just by the tallet door, is the plant I want to show you now. It is the stone crop. Some of the stems grow upright, while others are trailing. At the top of each upright stem is a cluster of bright yellow flowers. Some of these are fully open, and we see that each blossom has 5 pointed petals. The trailing stems have no flowers at all, they're barren, but the leaves on the barren stems are much more numerous and closer together than on those of the upright flowering stems. These leaves are very curious. They are not flat, like the leaves of the red valerian, the toadflax, and most other flowers. They are very thick and fleshy, something like a short, round, pointed stick. They grow close beside the stalk, not in pairs, but alternately, first a leaf on one side of the stalk, then a leaf on the other. They are erect, too. That is, they point in the same direction as the stalk. On the barren stems the leaves grow so closely they quite cover the stalk. They have a hot, sharp taste, and the plant is sometimes called wall-pepper. The roots are very thin, and can spread easily through narrow chinks of the wall. We will see one more plant of the walls before we look for flowers elsewhere. Our next plant is not very common at Willow Farm. Still, I know where to look for it. Built against one side of the big barn as the fold-yard is a little lean-to shed. Often there are calves in it. Just now we are more interested in something that is on the roof. Standing close by the wall of the shed is a cattle crib, a kind of big square box or trough on legs, in which hay or chaff is put for the cattle. The shed is not very high, and by standing on the crib we can scramble up onto the roof. Here is the plant we want to see. It is the house leek, of which a clump is growing between the tiles. Almost flat on the tiles is a dense mass of large, green, fleshy leaves. These leaves are evergreen. They do not die and fall off in winter. From this cluster of leaves rise straight, thick stems, nearly a foot high. The stems are thickly covered with erect leaves, which grow smaller towards the top of the stem. At the top of the stem is a cluster of very handsome rosy red flowers. Each blossom is star-shaped when fully open, and generally has 12 petals. If we could see the roots, we should find them very thread-like, or fibrous, like those of other flowers we have been looking at today. I do not think I can very well show you the roots, however. We should have to pull up a plant, and that would not please Ben, the cowman, at all. There is a belief in the country places that it is bad luck to disturb the house leek, that someone in the house on which it grows is sure to die soon afterwards. Certainly the plant is not growing on a house here, only on the calves' cot. Still, if any misfortune should happen to the calves, we might be blamed by Ben. Besides, it would be a pity to disturb so handsome a plant, would it not? We have spent some time in looking at these flowers on the walls and roof, because we think them very wonderful. We see how little soil they can have in which to grow, and how in dry weather they can have very little moisture either. Yet the leaves of several of them are thick and fleshy, and the flowers of some are large and beautiful. What could be more handsome than the blossoms of the wallflower, the red valerian, and the house leek? End of Wildflowers of the Farm, Chapter 3, Flowers on the Wall, by Owens Cooke.